Well, hello everyone. I'm really delighted to welcome you to TNC's latest podcast on the topic of how to build, deploy, and manage an agile global network. I'm John Waterhouse, CEO of Network Collective, and I'll be your host for the next 20 minutes. As I'm sure everyone joining knows, TNC is the UK's largest independent network and telecoms strategy and sourcing consultancy. We support over 280 major UK and multinational organizations to get the best possible commercial, technical, operational, and contractual results from all of their network and telecom solutions. I'm delighted to welcome our special guest today, Matt Jago. So, as I'm sure many of our viewers and listeners know, Matt is one of the highest profile IT leaders in the UK, both as a result of his work as head of information systems and operations at Sightsavers, as well as his long term contribution to the charity IT Leaders organization, which brings together CIOs from the UK's largest charities and NGOs. So, for those who don't know Sightsavers, it's an international non governmental organization that works with partners in developing countries to treat and prevent avoidable blindness and to promote equality for the people with visual impairments and other disabilities. It's really an inspiring organization that does absolutely amazing work. Matt, it's a pleasure to talk with you today. Would you like to say hello to our viewers and listeners?
Hello, viewers and listeners. Thank you for having me, John.
Great pleasure. So, look, we've got a great topic today. How to build, deploy, and manage an agile global network. It's extremely interesting. It's extremely timely. So, with the rise of cloud-based applications, a huge increase in the agility requirements for network and telecoms, and of course, let's not forget the vast uptake in remote working as a result of COVID. Many organizations are scrambling to build new infrastructures to support and to address those challenges. And for many organizations, this is increasingly meaning uh, moving away from the traditional approaches of MPLS and on-prem telephony and so on. But it's also driving a massive change in the operating models as organizations look to move away from what may be considered um, pretty clunky single supplier solutions from the traditional telcos and looking to identify and procure and deploy much more agile approaches. And often these are utilizing multiple suppliers. Now, given the very tricky geographies in which Sightsavers operates, the constrained budgets that come from trying to maximize expenditure on frontline services, Matt and his team have spent many years developing really innovative ways to deliver network and telephony solutions to their global user base. So as a result, Sightsavers has been really early adopters of some strategies that are really going mainstream now, and that many of our viewers and listeners will be familiar with or will be starting to grapple with. So, particularly moving away from MPLS services to internet services for network connectivity, using local ISPs rather than global telcos, moving away from on-prem telephony to cloud-based telephony. All these trends which are really becoming quite common and are on the agendas for lots of organizations. And crucially, Matt and his team have developed a very agile operating model to support those solutions. So, Matt, we're really looking forward to hearing your insights there and your experiences of making some of those things happen. So, it's three main questions we're going to go through, and if I may start with, as is traditional, with question one. So, what are the main challenges you've encountered in building your global network and telecoms infrastructure, and how would you say the main things you've done to overcome those challenges?
Thanks, John. So I've been at Sightsavers now for just over 12 years, and I started out on the service desk and have slowly sort of worked my way up through the various roles to where I am now. So I've seen it from all different angles. Um, the main challenge is obviously where we operate is the actual technology that's been available. If you consider that, in the UK, that we've all had broadband now for quite some time, and we talk in megabytes and tens of megabit connections.
Mm,
So that's not the case everywhere that we operate. When I first started at Sightsavers, we had several satellite connections to our offices, certainly in Africa, and they were extremely low bandwidth. Sort of, they'd guarantee sort of 32K of connectivity, and they'd burst up to maybe 128, and that would be an office of 12 people.
Wow.
Um,
Those were the days, right?
those were the days, and I don't know if you've ever heard the term of sunbursts, which is where satellites lose their connectivity because the sun is sort of behind the satellite. So you get sort of solar flare activity, and your internet just stops. It was a whole new sort of experience for me back then. So we were lucky to start moving away from these technologies. More, not necessarily more reliable. I think it's certainly initially when we started to move away from satellites, we were sort of dropping the reliability just to increase speed. As the local ISP started to sort of develop better technologies and better quality of service, we sort of took the hit on the reliability front. There was a lot of issues, quite a bit of downtime, but the speed when it was up was significantly better. Then I'm not sure exactly when it was, but there was a big sort of fiber pipe was plugged into sort of the east coast of Africa, sort of Kenya, Tanzania sort of way. And from there, because I think traditionally there was only one connection and it was coming through the north of Africa at that point. But from that just sort of spawned a whole load of activity and increased connections. And I think we replaced our 256K satellite connection in Kenya with a 10 meg fiber connection. And the difference was
game-changing stuff.
Completely unbelievable. So the model we had was very much, we stuck with sort of 1-year terms with a lot of our connections, and they were all locally managed. We supported them with the sort of technology and what they should be looking at, but they were locally managed sort of ISP connections. But again, we had that 1-year term. We didn't go for the 3-5-year terms at all because we wanted the flexibility to move as more technologies came through.
Right. So that enabled you to sort of piggyback on the technologies as they improved, as new things became available.
Yeah, and often the ISPs themselves were gaining more technologies, and they could then offer you. We ended up getting faster connections for less price from the same vendor, because we were at that renewal point earlier.
Yeah.
So that was quite key to sort of jumping on these technologies as soon as we could, and we were early adopters in a lot of them, and some of them didn't work. We did have some connections that the ISP was over promising, and we just rolled back to the old connection.
And have you found that reliability? You said you sort of took a hit on reliability to gain performance or bandwidth at least. Have you found over time that reliability has come back and you started to get much more stability into the network?
Definitely, and certainly with the advent of sort of fiber connections to the various exchanges, that's massively improved the reliability of these connections. There's still challenges, and there's still challenges with the basics. We run generators in a lot of our offices because the electricity isn't on a lot of the time. That's what we deal with.
Yeah.
So the reliability certainly improved, the speeds improved. And I don't think we took a hit for very long at all, really. The benefits, I think, of the technology changes was they were so rapid, and the adoption was so high that things were being tested and fixed very rapidly. So it was quite a lot of innovation, really.
And how did it work in terms of you mentioned that these are locally sourced services? Do you set standards centrally? Do you guide the local offices about what to buy? Not presumably who to buy from, but what they should be looking to source?
Sure. So At the end of the day, I couldn't tell you which ISP was best in Uganda or Kenya or Senegal, as much as they could tell me which mobile operator is best to cover, East Sussex, in the UK. Why would they know that, and why would I know that?
Yeah.
Not to rely on the expertise on the ground, um, and by sort of having that model, it gives us assurance that we're buying something that's locally well regarded, but also that they then manage that account. They then manage the conversations with the supplier. There is an obvious language barrier between us, and we do obviously talk with the suppliers, and if we've got any VPN issues with various things that will of course be on the phone, but the local office is always supporting us with that, and they've got that relationship, so you have to make use of what you've got.
That's interesting. So because the next question I was going to come on to is sort of how you built out the operating model, and obviously we've spoken many times in the past. You've got that. I guess in a traditional telco model, the issues are brought into a central help desk, and that's it's a sort of single point out to often to a single provider. Obviously you have multiple providers. It sounds like you have multiple, therefore let's use Uganda as an example. Uganda buys its own link. Uganda is involved in the troubleshooting of its own link. So but it sounds like you have almost a co-manage model, so you would get involved as a central service for some issues. The local office would support that, but equally they would have their own interactions, I guess, in faulting situations and so on.
Yeah, so I mean, you can look at it from a procurement standpoint of, there are, we have our various procurement guidelines within the organization, and then sort of various sort of delegated authority levels that, who can approve what and to what level. So with regards to the internet connections, that was always funded by the IT team, so out of the IT cost center. So that gave sort of an element of visibility on, well, this is the budget, this is what we can afford to
Hmm.
pay. So we're not going to go to the to the highest extreme. We're not going to get some company to roll fiber down the road to the office, because this is not viable from a cost perspective.
Hmm.
Um, but we'll work with you. You bring us your recommendations, and we'll suggest what you should be looking at. And sometimes you find that ISPs would sort of over promise and say, oh yes, we can deliver a 10 meg connection, but it's completely overpriced. Whereas actually, if you drop back a little bit to the 8 meg connection, you know they're actually comfortable they can deliver that,
Mm.
and you get a better service and you get a better price as a result. So it's that balance really, and again, working with the local staff who have the knowledge.
Yeah, I was going to say it sounds like um, yeah, you've got the IT expertise, but they've got the local market expertise, relationships, etc. Do you find that co-managed model, it, I was going to use the term keeps everyone honest, but the office is incentivized to suggest service providers they're comfortable to work with, because they know they're going to be part of that management solution going forwards. They're not just throwing it over the fence. Oh well, that's central IT's problem now. We don't have to worry about it. That presumably gives them a feeling of skin in the game.
It does, yes, and I think that they feel a bit empowered to do that, and take a bit of ownership of it. There, a bit more ownership of it. Therefore,
Hmm.
and it's at the end of the day, it's in their best interest. If they're putting forward a bad ISP, then they're going to get a bad network experience, and that's going to affect everything.
Yeah,
Um,
and critically, I guess it's not just your problem. They can't just sort of say, "Ah, well, this is IT." Because what one of the issues we constantly hear about from organisations is if central IT imposes the solution, it sort of almost gives the local operation uh, carte blanche. Oh well, it was just we never thought this was the right thing to do. It's just what IT did to us. They don't have that get out of jail almost in that co-managed model.
No, and yeah, everyone loves to blame IT. Of course, it's the go-to, and I do it as well. Yeah, it's all
despite being IT.
exactly. But yeah, I think, and you can expand this out to everything. You know, if IT, are too prescriptive on what you can and cannot do, then people are just going to find ways to do it a different way.
Mhm.
It's got to be a balance. Everyone's got to work together. It's got to be collaborative, or you're doomed to failure, really.
Yeah. And is that so? So, how do you divide roles and responsibilities between yourselves and and the local offices? So, do you have sort of pre-planned approaches? If a fault occurs, you do this and we do that, or or is it more dynamic in the given situation? How do you do that?
I think it's quite dynamic. I mean, the sort of the operating model of IT at SiteSavers, we do have quite a few staff in the UK, but over the last few years, we have been hiring in different regions. So we have member of staff in India. We've just hired last year. We hired somebody in Nigeria because we have so many staff there now. We needed local support. Um, on top of that, we have um, we call them overseas IT contacts, but they're effectively IT champions in each office. There are go-to contacts. They're quite often actually members of the finance team who are generally in the office more um, than our programmatic teams who are obviously going out into the field. Um, and there are points of contact. They're often the people that will probably be the liaison with the local suppliers. And then we also have sort of various, I suppose, what we would call sort of hot hands. So, like in a data center, you have your hot hands person who has to go in and plug that cable back in. Um, Depending on the country, depends on if we have somebody who's sort of contracted, they come in half a day a week and they deal with sort of the local problems that we just can't do over the phone or remotely. Um, and yeah, we have various different, I'd say, levels of those individuals. Some are contracted, some just come in as and when we need them to, or we're deploying a new firewall. Can you give us a quote to come in and just assist with plugging in and troubleshooting? Because it's the stuff you just can't do remotely,
Yeah.
and we don't get on a plane, obviously, to go down and fix these problems. And technology is now such that we don't need to do that very often at all.
And presumably that's something to be avoided. It's expensive. It's very time consuming for your people, and
And
you
yeah,
can't do that for every issue.
no, and we don't need to. So we're quite lucky in that the technology we deployed is it's we can generally either pre-configure it and then ship it, or we buy it locally, and it depends on the
Mm.
country. It depends on what restrictions we have in that respect.
I was going to say, what do you differentiate between? This is a slightly a leading question. One of the things which we hear from a number of customers where they're looking to move away from this kind of single supplier managed service to something that's more fragmented and they hope agile. They often say sort of differentiate between markets where we have IT capability, markets where we don't. So, in Thailand we have an IT guy, so we could locally source services there because he's there to do that. But in Malaysia we don't, and therefore we wouldn't be able to do that. Do you differentiate in the same way? Well, in Nigeria we have an IT person, so we we can do things differently than in Uganda where we don't. It sounds like you've sort of come up with workarounds so you can act the same way everywhere.
So, I mean, we work from everywhere. So I think it's economies of scale. So Nigeria, we've now got sort of 80, 90 members of staff. Um, we've got two offices in that country now. We do an awful lot of work there. So there was a need to really have somebody permanently sort of in the office and available. Some of our offices are sort of one or two members of staff, and that's where they start. We build up projects that we do for our beneficiaries over time. And certain offices will grow, and when certain projects finish, we close offices down once the work is done.
Mm.
Um, so we wouldn't obviously put a full-time member of staff in an office of two people from an IT perspective. But we need to, they need to be able to have some support. So if they're, that would probably be a third party sort of technician or local IT support agency that we would employ. And we would either employ them directly, or again, we'd ask for local knowledge on that.
Mm. It's very interesting. I mean, there's a number of points you made, and I think trying to sort of draw this up into I guess sort of set of key principles. For organisations that have got where they've got that single source model today, that's a very uniform network provision and an operating model everywhere. That's why they do it. They go to a global telco and they get the same service experience everywhere. By definition, if you go to that more fragmented model, which is becoming, it's quite on trend to talk about, we're going to go and buy services locally, and use services like SD-WAN to try and, integrate that together. I'll just be noting down some of the things you've been saying about I guess you have to embrace a set of principles, right? That you talked right at the start about sort of assumptions about technology availability. You can't just assume that the technology you used in country A is going to be available in country B. And we were talking to a customer yesterday about, could we use 5G everywhere? Like, well, no. You might be able to use it in country A, but it's not going to be available in country B.
I'd be here, so
Yeah, well, it's you clearly live in a developing market. It's as unfortunately, so do I, because there's no 5G here either.
no, but there will be 5G in other areas. So it really is about making use of the technologies that are available. But then, as I say, there's an assumption that you can get broadband here. Why can't you get broadband there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And in some cases, you can get better than broadband in certain places.
Yeah.
Everywhere has local restriction. It does come down to I don't like the term postcode lottery but it is that you can really be, well, if you're that side of that street, then you can get access to this service, and if you're not, you can't.
Yeah.
So it really is making use of what's available to you, and that has to be flexible.
Yeah. And I get it. Yes, it sounds like it's if I try and sum up what I think you've been telling us, you've got an approach and a model which is applicable everywhere in terms of the co-management with the local market, working with them. So you've got kind of mutual skin in the game, both as central IT, but as the local market. You obviously set budgets in that way. You see that the whole sort of process follows that model. But you then those are principles. The application in each local market has to be local in nature. You have to accept the technologies that are available. As you say, postcode lottery I quite like, because there are winners and losers, right? You might be delighted to find, oh, in this market we can have 5G, we can have a super quick service that's pretty cost effective. Oh, in this market, well, it's not so good, and we're going to get a pretty lousy service that's quite expensive. But you have to be prepared to adapt to those parameters and those services. You can't wish away, oh well, this is we're not going to be able to do business in this country because the broadband's not good enough. You've got to work around it.
Yeah, and even going back to the main point of today, you have to be agile. You've got to be able to, as you say, if you want to start operating in a new country, what are the options?
Yes.
What can we do? What can't we do? What are the restrictions? And again, you need to rely on the local knowledge on that to a point. So,
yeah. That's really interesting. I think we've got some really some really useful points. For organisations that are thinking about going on a journey from that sort of unified service to something that's more that is more agile. There's a mindset change, right? You have to look to what's available in the local market, but you have to have an operating model and a methodology and an ethos that allows you to, I mean, you said the same with how you support. Yeah, there'll be some markets where you've got Fred the IT guy. Well, great, we can do it that way. You have other markets where you don't have an IT guy, and you're going to have to, look for local support, or whatever that is. And again, you have to have that agility of mindset to implement a workable solution.
Yeah, and I think also the go back to the flexibility of it all. Of you might not be able to do what you really need to do in a certain area. So what do you then come back to on that? What are your fallbacks? What's your bare minimums? Yeah, your minimum viable product, effectively.
Yeah,
What you
absolutely.
do. And I think, again, the technology that's ever evolving, sometimes that actually helps, sometimes it doesn't. So you look at software as a service and all the cloud-based computing. This is great. What it relies on heavily is bandwidth.
Yeah.
You haven't got that, you're then sort of thinking, well, okay, if we move that service to a software as a service component, what do we, how's that going to work? Is everyone going to be able to access that? Great, we're going to do video calls all the time now. Well, and COVID's really shown that, everyone working from home and some people having to rely on sort of, internet dongles, data usage. Let's do a nice big group video call.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just burnt through 2 gig of data in a half-hour telephone call, and I've got 5 more of those today. That's not viable. How do we change that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, a real challenge. But again, you need that flexibility, and to be able to have that setup where you can be flexible allows you to adapt quickly to the ever-changing market.
Fantastic. Matt, I'm very conscious we've run out of time for today's podcast, but that has been extremely interesting. As always with these conversations, I feel we could go on for another hour and still be covering interesting ground, but
probably best we don't.
Probably best that we don't. And but Matt, thank you ever so much for joining us today. You've been absolutely fascinating, and I have absolutely no doubt you've brought some real insights to the topic, which our viewers and listeners will enjoy greatly. So thank you very much, and thank you, of course, to everyone watching and listening. Please do let us know any questions you have about this topic, about any other topic that relates to network and telecoms, of course. So please do go to our website, networkcollective.co.uk, or of course any of the usual social channels. We'd love to hear from you. And we look forward to talking to you all again soon.
Thanks, everyone.